Hi friends, hello, happy Thursday. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm Lisa Hetrick. I'm super excited to be here with you today. We have a really fun tutorial. I have a really fun tutorial that's going to be a little bit of mixed media, so to speak. We're going to be playing with some colored pencils and some pattern stamping and watercolor. And we're going to try a resist technique with colored pencils. So, and I'm going to talk, we're going to nerd out, of course, and I'm going to talk a little bit about hot press paper. So that's what we're going to do today. I can see people popping in. Hello, Susan, Gloria, Catherine, Kathy. Hello, everyone. So happy to see everybody here today. I have a little story to share before we dive in, because we are going to dive in. This is going to be a fun tutorial today. Less than 2 minutes before we went live, my microphone wasn't working. Now I have 2 microphones and I have a bunch of different things set up here, and I'm constantly working on this tech setup. But literally everything that normally works just stopped working. And I'm like watching the countdown. I'm like, well, hopefully it'll pop back on. So hopefully you can hear me. It looks like everything's working really well. So, all right, friends, I'm just so happy to see everybody here today. I know it's a kind of an odd time sometimes for our friends out west, and I am working on the times and timing of things, and just know I'm constantly working on the times, trying to figure out what's going to work and what isn't going to work. But okay, let's go ahead down to the down camera. Now all of the supplies are listed below in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, it's listed in the description. Hi, Lynn. If you're watching on Facebook, it's also listed in the description. So I'll talk about the supplies as we're going along doing the tutorial, but I won't be kind of just introducing the supplies. Now today, as always with my card tutorials, we're focusing on techniques and a lot of different techniques, and nerding out a little bit versus focusing on the anatomy and the dynamics of making a card. Okay, so let's get going. I had this idea and I wanted to do some pattern stamping, but I wanted to create a resist technique without doing embossing. So I got to thinking about colored pencils and what's in colored pencils. So these are Prismacolors. I've got a Prismacolor Premier Pink, and I have a Prismacolor White, and I also have a Sharpie China marker. Now, what's in all of these pencils that make them uniquely qualified to do resist techniques is that they're wax-based pencils. So you could also use a crayon, like a white crayon, or a colored crayon. Crayons are wax-based. So these will help us to create that resist when we watercolor, and it's going to help us give that kind of like distressy, washy, white kind of embossed look without embossing. Okay, just like totally nerded out. I see more people popping in. Great, I'm coming in clear on audio. Perfect. So we're going to be using these Prismacolor Premiers. Now I chose the Prismacolor. Normally I use the Faber-Castell Polychromos as my colored pencil choice. Those colored pencils are made with, they're oil based, so they don't work as well for resist as a wax based pencil. Okay, so keep that in mind. So we're going to be using that, and then we're going to be using hot press paper. Now, this is Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor hot press paper. Now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between hot press paper and cold press paper and show you a couple samples. Now, I tend to use cold press paper, 100% cotton, for all of our paper crafting projects. Hot press paper, the difference is that it's smoother, okay? So it is a smoother paper. This is 100% cotton, but it's smooth. And you can do wet washy techniques, but the watercolor tends to sit a little bit on top. It's a less of a thirsty paper. 100% cotton paper that's cold pressed. It has texture in it. It's what I call a super thirsty paper. Here are just some examples. I got a couple examples of paintings that I've done with hot press paper, and I'm just going to kind of show you that the watercolor is absolutely beautiful, and I love working with hot press paper when I'm going to pair up colored pencil and watercolor. Colored pencil is amazing on hot press paper. So is watercolor pencils. They're amazing on hot press paper. They glide across the paper because it's super smooth. And I just kind of dig it. You can see that these washy techniques are kind of washy, but they're not like, it feels like this color is sitting on top of the surface. So here's just some couple samples of projects that I've done painted on hot press paper. And then I'm going to pull a sample of a recent washy watercolor paper on cold press so you can kind of see the difference. Here is a Little Mermaid. She was done on hot press paper and using the mixed media like technique that we're going to do today. There's a little bit of white wax crayon oil pastel in here, and that gives it a little bit of texture, but also gives it that beachy, like that water kind of look. Here is an example of hot press paper, very similar to that other painting. This was the inspiration for another stamp set in my collection for, I can't even remember the name of it. I should have remembered the name, but this was the inspiration for that set for the iris that I did in that set. And then here's another version of hot press paper, and you can see that there's some gold on here. So that's why I really enjoy hot press paper. Super smooth, 100% cotton, takes watercolor really well, but you have a lot more control. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another one just to kind of do, I didn't have it right next to me. So I'm going to grab, let's grab these two so that you can see these side by side. And you have come to the nerding out portion of me talking about hot press paper versus cold press paper. This is cold press paper. You can see the texture in the paper. You can see the washy watercolor techniques. You've got a lot more blurring happening here. You can see in the texture of the paper how the watercolor is embedding itself and kind of traveling through the fibers of the paper, versus hot press paper where the watercolor is kind of sitting on top. It is kind of bleedy looking, but it's sitting on top, and it's got less movement and less texture going. Okay, completely nerded out about hot press and cold press paper. And then we're going to dive into why it's going to be fun to use the hot press paper for this card project. So let's dive in. Now, I am using, again, like I said, the Strata Nerd Away. Friends, I can hear myself, like in my brain, I can hear myself talking. And it's like, oh boy, Lisa, you need to rein it in a little bit. You're kind of going off the rails, but I can't help it. This is how I teach, and it's super fun, and I love to show examples. So, okay, we're using Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor, hot press paper. There are lots of different versions of hot press papers and cold press papers and lots of different brands. And I've done some tutorials and I've done some sharing on that. If that's something you're interested in, like the differences between brands, let me know in the chat. It's something I'm like, add to my list of things that I want to share. Also, along the way today, if you have any questions and you see my gaze going that way, that's where all of the comments are. If you have questions, just put the word question in the chat and I'll come in and be able to answer it. Okay, let's get going. Now, I've got a piece of hot press watercolor paper cut with the master layouts die. I've already pre-done this. Normally, I would just take a full sheet of paper, start building my pattern, do all my watercolor work, but I wanted to kind of cut our time today a little bit and focus on the techniques. I'm going to use a piece of Passionate Pink cardstock as my base. My sample was with Craft, which I really like, but I think that using the Passionate Pink from Gina K will really help this pattern pop even more. So that's what we're going to use. And we're going to start to build our pattern. Now I've got watercolor over here to the side. We'll talk about that when we get started. I'm using Kindred Spirits, and I'm going to be using these two daisy-like flowers. And we're going to build our pattern first. And we're going to do, from a design perspective, we're going to build a pattern that kind of cascades down this way. I want to leave a little bit of open space here and maybe a little bit of open space up here. So we're doing kind of a cascading pattern, and I don't want the flowers to overlap each other. So I am using Amalgam Chocolate Truffle. And the reason why I'm using Amalgam is because we're going to be doing some watercoloring, and I don't want this time, I don't want my watercolor, I don't want my ink to bleed. Now, normally I will stamp it in a color and you add a little bit of water to that ink and let it bleed. This time I don't want it to move, so I'm using Amalgam. Now I'm going to go ahead and work in threes, and I kind of got a lot of ink on there. So we're going to see what happens. I'm going to cascade my first three, and I'm not so worried about, you can see I did not push really hard. I didn't mush down with my stamp because I don't need to, and I'm just spinning this around. You can see how I'm not overlapping them either. I'm just getting them down, and I'm not super concerned about it being like, if you were really super concerned about it being crisp, you could get out your Misty, but I'm not, because we're going to be adding watercolor, we're going to be adding colored pencil, so I'm not super concerned about it being a crisp, clean image. I'm never really concerned. All right, now I'm going to take the smaller stamp, and I'm going to add threes kind of going this way. So I'm able to preserve that space here and a little bit of space up here. And I'm just creating a really simple pattern. I'm going to nest this in kind of close, but not touching. Well, that one was touching a little bit. Let's kind of nest that in right there. And then let's just come over here and nest one. And you can see I'm just flipping the stamp around to see how I like that orientation. And I'm kind of nesting the petals together to create that cascading pattern. I would have liked that to have been backed off just a little bit, but I'm not concerned enough to start over. I'm not concerned enough to start over. I like it, and we're just going to run with it. All right, let me go ahead and close up my inks. And now we're going to build in some of our color with our colored pencils and a China marker. Okay, so don't hesitate to ask questions along the way if you have any. I'm going to come in just a little bit tighter here, and hopefully that helps us a little before we start in on the watercoloring. Now, I have this blush pink. It's like a rose color. Let's go ahead. I want to just do an example of this technique and just kind of show you. So I am going to apply some of the color and apply some of the white pencil in some of the petals. I'm not going to completely coat each petal. I'm just trying to get some texture going so that when we apply the watercolor, we get that resist effect that I'm going for. So I want to talk a moment about holding the pencil, because I think this is important. I'm a lefty. I'm super heavy-handed when I write and draw, and I almost sometimes catch myself grating my teeth doing it, which I'm trying to be conscious not to do that. Now, the application of the of the pencil is kind of important, like how it gets down on the hot press paper. You don't want to be choked up really tight because you'll have a tendency to go up and down vertically, and the tip of the pencil is very soft. The Prismacolors are super, super soft. Hi, Donna. And you're going to end up putting some, you're going to end up tearing the fiber and making it kind of super scratchy. So what I like to do is kind of back off a little bit and use the pencil from the side and kind of come in with it from the side, and I can go further and I can apply my pencil to an area and get a lot more down without feeling like I'm scratching the paper. So I hope that tip helps if you've been working with colored pencil. I've got a couple colored pencil tutorials on the channel, and I'm going to be integrating them more. We're starting to integrate lots of different things in with watercolor to create some of these mixed media painterly effects, and this is one of them. Okay, I'm going to take this rose, and the reason why I chose rose is because our overall color palette is going to be yellow, pink, and orange to kind of create this really kind of fun, bright look. But you can see as I turn this to the light where the wax resist is. That gives it that kind of painterly kind of look. All right, I'm going to go in, and I'm kind of holding my pencil out. I'm just going to apply a little layer of pencil. Now, hot press paper. While I'm doing this, I'm going to work the 3 big flowers, and I might be putting it in some random places. So while I'm applying the pencil into the petals, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hot press paper. So let's get my face off of here. The hot press paper is really, really good for colored pencil. If you really enjoy using colored pencil with your stamped images, I would highly suggest trying out the hot press paper or using Bristol. And here's why. Because the paper, this paper, even though it's not textured, it has a little bit of, it has a tiny bit of texture that helps grip the pencil. It helps with the application of the pencil. It helps, it's not super smooth, so the pencil's not gliding off of the edge. It just kind of makes application of the pencil really a lot easier. And that's what I really enjoy about the hot press paper. Now, the Strathmore hot press paper has a slight ivory tone to it. So it's a little bit more, it's a little more yellowish. If you're interested in brands that are more hot press brands that are like more of a bright white, there are brands out there. Fabriano is one. The Arteza brand is another. Oh, yep, I think I just colored the negative space. Yeah, right there. I just colored the negative space. Oh well, we're gonna let it be. Okay, I've got my pink in here. Now, the pink is going to resist the watercolor, but it's also going to give us a little bit of a pink undertone in pencil. So it's going to be more subtle when the watercolor hits the pink. The white is really where the magic is. So let's go in. Now, for the white, I'm not going to be holding it like this. I'm actually going to hold it more like this because I feel like I have more control for using the side of my pencil by holding it like this. And because I'm really getting a lot in here, and I'm actually going to take my white pencil and go over the pink and burnish it down. So this is like burnishing, this is blending that pink down a little bit, blending that color pencil down. Now, if you're using colored pencil and you're coloring your stamped images and you're using Gamsol, which we've done before on this channel, and actually Gina does a lot of tutorials using colored pencil and Gamsol. That's one way to blend and burnish out the color. I'm using this burnishing technique a little bit differently today because I've got the white pencil over top of the color and I'm not coloring in each petal. I really just want to get that white resist effect with a little bit of that pink underneath. And you know what? In my head, it's all working out. So we'll see what happens. All right, I've burnished down that pink. Now I'm going to just kind of go into some of the other petals and add some more white. And this is kind of random. And I can kind of see what's happening. Kind of not. But I'm also putting like a really medium pressure on these petals. And you can see the tip of my pencil getting kind of worn down. One of the important things about doing this technique with colored pencils is making sure you have you sharpen your pencil. Did I do down here? I did up here. I'm going to do down here, and I'm going to apply a little more here. And you notice I haven't done the smaller ones yet. That's okay. I'm going to come in with a little bit, and I'm also going to use the China marker. Now, if you own the Distress colored pencils or any other colored pencil brand, you just want to make sure that your colored pencil brand is wax-based because it's the wax that creates that resist. I put a little bit there. Looks like I did. And if you don't have colored pencils and you want to do this technique, you just pull a China marker. Any brand will do. I just happen to have the Sharpie one. And I'm going to be using this Sharpie one in some of these areas. So again, I'm holding it from the side. And I'm just going to start applying in quite a bit of this color. So the difference between the Sharpie, oh boy, let's see if I can turn this so that you can see it. So you can see some of the wax. The difference between the Sharpie and the Prismacolor is that the China marker has a lot more wax. Hello, I see more people popping in. Hello, friends. Okay. So you can also use a white crayon. Grab your Crayolas and use a white crayon. You can use that. All right, I've got quite a bit in here. I'm turning this towards the light to kind of see what I got. And it's very random and kind of scratchy. And I'm going into the areas just to kind of create a little bit of a negative, like in the negative areas of this pattern, and see what we get. All right, and you're never really going to know until you get started applying the color. All right, couple different things. Let's talk about our color palette. I just brought back in, you know, let's move my face. We're gonna move my face across here so that we can get into our colors, because I'm a lefty, so everything kind of needs to be over on the left. I've got my little Winsor Newton palette here. I also brought in, I'm going to bring in some other colors here for you to take a peek at if you're watercoloring with your inks. And you can absolutely do this technique with your inks. Here are some suggestions. In the Gina K line, Wild Dandelion, Passionate Pink, and I believe, yep, Tangerine Twist. This is a great combination for what we're going to do. So we've got a yellow, a pink, and an orange. If you want to do distress inks and do this, Squeeze Lemonade's good, Festive Berries, and Spice Marmalade. So that's 3 colors. I'm going to be using transparent orange probably permanent rose, and a little bit of lemon yellow. So those are some combinations in different mediums for you to be able to do this painting. So we've got a question from Catherine. Let's pop this question up so everybody can see it. Is there much difference between using a white crayon and a China marker? Not much difference at all. The China marker is just, you know, more like a pencil, and has a lot of a wax content, just like a crayon would. Not much difference at all. The crayon, though, you just need to kind of apply it, because when you first apply a crayon, the crayon will skip over paper, and it kind of gives you a little bit of texture. If you really want more solid, you just apply it a little more intensely. Okay. All right. Hello. We have new friends popping in from Texas. Hi, Debbie. Hello. Okay, let's get going. So everybody, I'm going to leave this here in case you want to take a quick screenshot of colors. But, you know, you can also rewind. You can just listen to the colors that we use. So I'm not going to paint with inks today. I am going to paint with some of the leftover paint that we've got sitting in here. All right, I've got my water here. I started putting my water on my desk in a jar that has a lid, because my cats, I've caught them more than once trying to drink paint water. So we don't want that, right? Okay, I'm going to start with the first layer, and we're going to be adding some layers of color in between. I'm going to be drying and adding layers, drying and adding more layers to intensify, glaze, and have that color glow up. So let's get going. I'm going to wet the entire page. I'm going to wet the entire paper first. So I should have got a bigger brush for this. You can see some beading happening. We're already getting some resist. And notice that the paper wants to start to buckle a little bit. Hot press paper doesn't particularly like a ton of water, but it will handle it, and it'll adapt. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to start with my yellow first. I'm just reactivating the yellow that I already had in here that was drying, and I'm just going to drop a couple little bits of yellow. Now this is Winsor & Newton. This particular brand of watercolor stays where you put it. As you notice, there was no super whoosh happening with that color. We're using this cadmium yellow, cadmium free yellow. Look at this whole area right here that's resisting. It's resisting this color, and that's fine. That's kind of cool. I'm digging the way that looks. And this is messy. We don't, you know, no like massive experience required with painting here. We're just dropping in some color. Now I'm going to come in with some of this permanent rose and drop some more in, and just kind of be like a little picky about where I'm going to put that color. Maybe not so picky. Just kind of dropping it in. And Winsor & Newton, we used this last week, and the reason why I chose it is because it goes where I tell it to go. It is a very predictable watercolor that will stay, and you can lift it out, but it is a very predictable watercolor that will kind of stay where you put it. All right, so I'm kind of digging that. You can see some of the resist, like see that resisting right there. Let me try to get some color in here, and it's going to resist a little bit. Kind of digging this technique. What we can see happening with the resist is you can see where the whites are happening, right? Whites, where all the places where I put white. But you can also see that pink. So I chose that lighter Prismacolor, and you could do this with any color. It doesn't have to be pink, but some of the lighter colors will kind of like pop through. So it looks like we've got that dimension, extra dimension of color, and we didn't create it with height. Okay, I hope that makes sense. TJ, do you ever tape your paper down? No. Here's why. because I'm a left-hander. And what happens is when I tape my paper down, I end up running my hand over everything. So what I tend to do is move the paper. So I don't ever really tape it down. Sometimes when I'm painting a bigger project, I might tape it down. But I find it works better for me to just move the paper around where I'm painting. So let's go ahead and dry this. Then we're going to do another layer. Look, there's a little heart right there. I love it when that shows up in my paintings. Let's get this nice and dry, and you're also going to see how the watercolor shifts. And this happens with every watercolor brand, except for one, which I'm going to talk about into the future. Every watercolor, when you paint them wet, looks super, super vibrant, but when it dries, it tends to shift, and it'll become lighter. Winsor Newton does the same thing. Go ahead and get this dry. Oh, I'm kind of digging it. Look at the resist that's happening. I'm loving it. It's so super vibrant. Let's clean up my mess here. You're welcome, TJ. You can see, oops, let's get in the screen. So you can see my resist areas. You can also see the pink Prismacolor and how that's resist. Now, digging it, loving it, want to add a couple more layers to get a little bit more intensity of color, get this to glow up a little bit. So now the paper is dry. This technique, the paper is dry. This technique that we just did was more of a wet into wet. The brush is wet, there's wet pigment on the brush, the paper is wet. Now we're gonna go in and do wet into dry. My paper's dry, my brush is wet. I'm applying more paint and pigment to the project. Let's get a little more in here, because we're going to be a little bit more intentional about where we're going to put some of this color and to create a little bit of a glow up here. So adding some color here. I'm just dropping some colors in. I want to add a little bit up here. I've got a resist going up here. Got a little bit, you can see where it's resisting. Now, I like this technique. I love emboss resist, and I've done this many times on the channel. But what I really like about this technique is that it has kind of just a little bit more texture without the height. Cleaning off my brush, dabbing it off, just getting some of that sopping wetness off. And then I'm just coming in and feathering out some of the things that I've got here, some of this color. Feathering this out. If I went into my lines a little bit, I can just kind of take that out. Feathering it out and around, letting it come out. See how it's resisting right here? Love that. I want to add a little bit of orange here. So I'm just going to play around with adding some color in a couple different spots, adding a little bit more of negative painting. So a couple tutorials ago, we did a negative painting tutorial. And by applying, it was with the hot air balloon project. We did a total negative painting tutorial, but it wasn't a resist tutorial. So I'm basically doing the negative painting part of that tutorial in here. I'm just kind of following, and how it adds a little bit more color. It's giving it its glow up. And it's jacking up the luminosity. This technique is called glazing, where you dry your layers in between and you add more layers on top. And over time, especially with good watercolors, with transparent watercolors, the colors start to glow up. I call it their glow up. They get more luminous. It jacks up the luminosity. Now, if you're doing this technique with inks, it's a little bit different. It'll take, you can jack up the luminosity and do the same kind of technique with the inks, but it's going to be a little bit less textural, if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense. Love this. I want one-on-one personally. Oh, hello, Joanne. She wants one-on-one instruction. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I've thought about doing that. If that's something people are interested, I've thought about doing some one-on-one like Zoom lessons if people are interested, where we kind of spend an hour or two together and I tackle like some things that you want to learn in a one-on-one way. I love that. That's something I've been thinking about doing. I'm just adding some more color here. Let's come in here and do this. So if that's something you might be interested in, pop it in the chat. You know, it would be a private lesson, so to speak. It wouldn't be super expensive, just something I'm working out. Okay, Catherine just had a question. Are whole pans a lot easier to use than half pans? Amazon has an almost half price sale on Winsor Newton Cotton right now. On the whole pans? Okay. So are they easier to use? Not necessarily. However, the whole pans, even like the Rosa Gallery that I've showed you, any kind of whole pans I've brought into our projects, Rosa Gallery, Winsor Newton, White Knights. The cool thing about the whole pans is it's an astronomical amount of paint at an affordable price, number one. Number two, you can get your brush in there and get it like super, super juicy. So if you're doing big washy techniques like that with a big honkin' brush, I love a good whole pan. I tend to bring the half pans in for class because they're small and they kind of fit in. And when I'm working in these kind of small ways, I find that I don't have a lot of trouble working with the half pans. I'll get my color. You can see I'm grabbing some color and then I'm just putting it in my in the mixing space and I'll work with it from there. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me know if that answers your question. And if they're half price, like I said, I think I said this last week about Winsor Newton, or when we were talking specifically about that brand. Wet brush, paper's dry, wet into dry here, and I'm just applying some color. I'm going to clean off my brush and feather this out. I think I said that Winsor Newton, keep an eye on it. Like, I also have them linked below in the description. Keep an eye on them on Amazon because they always go, like, sometimes they go on lightning deals, and like you can get the little 12 box for like the 12 Skechers box for like $10. I mean, it's a massive sale. So you can always keep an eye on it. All right, I'm digging this. So from a design perspective, what I was focusing on for the negative painting portion is kind of this cascading area. You can see I tried to apply a little bit here, but I have a resist going there. So kind of fun. I love this. I feel like I want to put a little something right here. So with the pattern, if you're doing this and you're trying to figure out where you want to add more color for the glow up, focus on how it cascades and where you want people's eyes to go. Like I'm going to come up here because I want something up here. And I kind of want people's eyes to like go down in this direction to kind of follow the pattern a little bit. All right, we're going to blend this out. So clean brush and just kind of feathering out that edge. Catherine, last question. No worries. Doesn't have to be your last question. The question was, what quality is the Cotman? Okay. I talked about this, I think, 2 videos ago when we kind of took a deeper dive into Cotman versus professional. Here's how I feel about it. I love Cotman. I think they're very, very useful for they're very predictable. They're very useful for our paper crafting projects. The difference between the Cotman and the professional line, like I'm using the professional line today, is that there's more pigment in these pans than there are in the Cotman. Does that make it better or worse? No. Different. Just makes it different. It just, once you know that about your watercolor, you can adapt how much you put on your brush. So with the Winsor Newton Cotman, I feel like you just have to run your brush over the pan a couple more times than you would on a professional brand. So you're to get the same kind of pigment strength. And I would play with it. But one of the beautiful things about Cotman that I do like is that when you're doing like washy effects and you really want light colors, like light glazes of color, I think it really shines. And for card making, and if you can get that really good price, wow, yeah, it's fantastic. I've also talked about the Paul Rubens, the Rosa Gallery, and finding them at those there's less expensive price points for your budget are great. But Cotman is a great way to start. Stable, easygoing, really helps you learn how to control and mix your colors. And then over time, if you want to upgrade and try out different things, you can try out different things. But honestly, I have a Cotman sketcher box. I showed it a couple times ago. A Cotman sketcher box of 12 that I have had forever. I say forever, but for a really long time, like close to 20 years. And I've just refilled it, or I've just put new pans in it as I've used it. So it'll last a really, really long time. So I hope that helps. Yes, kind of nerded out a little bit. And Cheryl was saying, you go, girl. Okay, TJ said, what watercolor do you recommend? For paper crafting projects, I recommend the Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor. This is hot press. We're using hot press paper today. I've also used cold press paper. I do have that listed down below in the description. Take a peek at it. I recommend this for paper, for our card making projects. For painting other things, you know, like if you're painting projects, I use different paper. Like I like this Arches paper. I'll use Canson. I'll use 100% cotton. These papers are a little bit more expensive, but for a reason. Like this is going to be a gift after I get it framed. And I want it to last and be archival, so I'm using different papers. But for my card making projects, I like to use these because they take whatever I put at them as far as watercolor goes, and they make a really nice card. They're weighted really well. It's 140 pounds, and they're just really nice. Okay, now, because I've talked so much, everything is starting to dry on that second layer, and you can see that we've got our glow up happening. And we still have our resist. Now, what I want to do is go in and do a third layer, and I want to focus a little more attention up here because this flower looks a little bit washed out. We've got the resist happening. This flower I'm liking. This flower I'm liking too. But I think I want to add a little bit more yellow up here and just kind of let some of that color pop up against that pink. See how it's resisting? And get a little glow up happening here, just in a couple areas. One of the other tips, I'm going to nerd out for a minute. One of the other tips I like to do with the rose colored watercolor is I like to add a little bit of a yellow to it, and I feel like it jacks up the luminosity a little bit. It mixes with the rose. Oh, look at that resist happening right here. This is my big resist, and I'm digging that. It looks like a sploosh of water. Can you imagine like doing this color palette, doing these flowers or any other kind of flower in your stash and doing them in the beautiful blues? I tend to gravitate towards the orange and the pinks and the yellows when I'm doing flowers. I want to see if I can get a little bit of a glow up happening here That's a big resist right there, so I know I'm not going to get much. And then definitely something over here. I'm going to add a little bit, and I'm just dropping this color in. Brush is wet, paper's dry. I got a huge resist. You can see how it's resisting the paint right there. So I'm just going to drop it and see kind of what happens and let it be. A little bit of a less resist happening up here. Let's add, right now I'm just noodling around and adding some color in, just for a little bit of extra oomph. I see a spot right here that makes me want to just add a little something. Okay. And this one down here. So right now, see, I'm just playing and adding in another layer of color and just dropping it in, letting it resist wherever it's going to resist. But adding these layers are contributing to the glow up of this panel. Now, I see something that I don't like, and you might not see it, but right here I've got a little bit of a hard line, and it's still wet, so I'm just going to take my wet brush and just feather it out. Digging it. Right here, we've got a little bit of that transparent orange that's creating some, mixing with that pink. Now I can just feel myself getting a little bit picky and nerdy. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of transparent orange in a couple places, just to jack up some of this pink. Maybe put a little bit right here. And then I'm going to be done because I can feel how easily I can overdo it. Now, let's just go ahead and dry it. We're going to put our card together, and we've got it. We're kind of good to go. Ooh, I'm digging the way that looks. It's very, very bright. Very bright. Okay. Let's see, a little bit wet. Okay, so now you see that it's dry. Now look at the difference between, we've done 2 layers, 2 or 3 layers. Look at the difference, if you can remember the difference between the first layer, how when I dried that watercolor, how it shifted. And now we've added more on top, but not all over. And we've got this really, oops, there's a little bit of wetness right there. It's a lot brighter. We can see our resist. You can see the pink color pencil underneath, and it still kind of created that resist, but gave us a little bit of that pink coming through. Loving that. So this is kind of a mixed media technique. Look, 1 layer. We got a lot of texture and dimension, but we did it all on 1 layer. I'm digging it. Okay, let's come in. And you can touch it. When you touch it, you can feel some of the waxy spots. Ah, I hope you give this technique a try. I hope you give it a try. It is super easy to do. Super fun. I'm just adding a little bit of Connect glue to the back of it. You can see how warped my paper is. Now, if you want to tape your paper down, because that makes you feel more comfortable, tape your paper down. If you tape your paper down, you're going to have less warping. Got a little glue blob right there, so let's kind of just feather that out. You can see I'm kind of messy with the glue. I'm going to open up my Passionate Pink card. I like using the glue because it gives me a chance to kind of shift it around and line it up and eyeball it. Kind of put my hands down here and make sure it adheres. And I like the Connect glue because it works really well with watercolor paper. And in case you haven't noticed, I use a lot of watercolor paper every week. Now I'm going to resist the urge to put embellishments on this card, but you could. You could totally put embellishments on this card. But I really like the watercolor and the resist, and I think it kind of stands alone. We've got a lot of texture and dimension. It feels like some of these flowers are popping out at you, and some are in the back. It's kind of fun. All right, I took the sentiment, we're kindred spirits, and I already cut it out, and I used the die cutter. I used the coordinating die, and I stamped it out in that brown amalgam, the chocolate truffle, because it'll kind of just pull some of that brown. Now, you could have used black amalgam if you want to. If you wanted your card to have a lot more contrast between the black ink and the watercolor, use the black. Use obsidian or jet black. I use the brown, the chocolate truffle, and I'm just going to kind of lay that right here. I think that's where I want it. Yeah, just going to lay that right there. I'm not popping it up because I feel like it already has some texture. Kind of want to keep things on one plane here. Here we go. Kind of digging it. I'm digging this card. I'm loving it. So I use the chocolate truffle because it's a warmer color, and because I use the cadmium yellow, which is more like wild dandelion. It's a warmer yellow. And I used rose, which is actually a cooler pink, but when you mix that rose with the cadmium yellow, you get that warm feeling, especially when you're putting it together. So the card, this color combination is unique in that it has some warmth, and it has these little pops of cool happening, but they're all very cohesive. And that was my color nerd out for the day. All right, I'm digging the way this card looks. Here was our original idea. Here's my original idea. Definitely different. Oh, one more thing. To jack up some of the whites, let's bring in some Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. It's always like a little finisher, right? Love this bleed proof white. It's a little dry, but again, I'll just activate it with some water. And pop some down here if I want to so you can see it. Love bleed proof white. We're going to use this and we're going to speckle some things. We're just going to intensely speckle some of this white down just to add to it. Instead of using embellishments, we're bleed proof whiting. Oh, I'm digging it. Love it. I am really pleased with the way this card came out. Let me close this up before I end up getting it all over, because that would be me. All right, digging this. So, softer palette of color, brighter palette of color, and using that passionate pink as the card base really helps draw attention to the layer and the color palette on the layer, and really kind of makes it pop. This has a really kind of summer vibe going for it. This kind of has a soft, muted, popping into spring vibe, I guess. I hate using that word vibe too, but you know, it is what it is. All right, I'm digging it. I'm loving the way that looks. Okay, friends. Whew, we did it! And we almost did it all like within the hour, which is very unusual because lately I've been going over. I hope that you really enjoyed today's tutorial and you learned something new, because I know that many of you have colored pencils and at least have a white crayon sitting around for resist techniques. So give it a try. Some white colored pencils, some of your lighter colored pencils, grab your floral stamps and start creating a pattern and get out that watercolor and play and try this out. I think you'll really have a lot of fun. The card came together really quickly. It doesn't feel super stressful, like you have to paint every petal. And it's just really big on texture without a lot of height. So, okay, everybody's sharing that. I love the brighter one. Thank you, Lisa. I can't wait to try this mixed media approach. Yes, try it. Get out the supplies and give it a go. Okay, friends, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you got a lot out of this tutorial. If you did and you really enjoy these tutorials, I would encourage you to hit like and subscribe here on YouTube. Apparently that means something. Usually I don't ask, usually I forget, but I remember today. So if you can hit like and subscribe, that's fantastic. Then you'll get notified when I go live. I will be going live next week. If you're on, I think on Thursday again. Yes, on Thursday. If you're on my email list, you'll get that pop into your email. I'll also share out on social media when I'm going live and what we plan to do. And yeah, lots of fun stuff. Lots of fun stuff popping up. Again, my email list, if you're interested, is down below in the description. And I would also encourage you to pop on over to craftyourjoy.com. That's my online classroom. I have a free class over there in watercolor. If you're just like to dip in and try it out, feel free to sign up. And I also have a free community over there. And I will say that many of you, I recognize many of our names of people that come every week to our tutorials, and many of you are already in my free community. I am planning a tutorial that'll be a live tutorial just for the community members, okay? So it's going to be just something a little bit special that's going to be happening either this month or the very beginning of next. Been working out some of those details. So just putting it out there. Join the community. And the reason why is I'm never really sure how much you actually see in social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of the groups that we're all part of. I'm never really sure if you actually see the content. So I created my own community inside my classroom so I can put all that content there and you can see it all in one place. So perfect, perfect. All right, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. I am so grateful, and I am sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. If you make this card and you share it out in your social media, please share it with me. I would love to see it, or email it to me, or just email me anything that you make if you want some feedback too. Okay, friends, thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye now.